Flames tore out of the shattered cockpit like they were alive, twisting into the night air beyond the perimeter fence of RAF Lakenheath. The jet's nose was buried deep in soaked farmland, fuel burning in violent orange waves that pushed firefighters back step by step. Sirens screamed. Security vehicles slid across mud. Dozens of phones were already raised, recording what looked like certain tragedy. Inside the cracked canopy, Squadron Leader Nathan Cross fought the ejection sequence he had refused only minutes earlier. He had been ordered to punch out over open sky. He did not. Because strapped behind him in a reinforced tactical harness was his German Shepherd canine partner, Viper. "Stand," Nathan commanded through smoke and falling sparks. Viper did not thrash. He did not bark. He locked his stance, steady and trained, eyes fixed only on Nathan. Ground crew shouted for him to abandon the wreck. Someone yelled. The jet could detonate at any second. Nathan reached for Viper's release latch as another explosion ripped through the fuselage. If he frees the dog now, can they outrun the fire together? Tell me below what you would do, and stay with Brave Canine Stories, because this is only the beginning. The morning at RAF Lakenheath began clean and controlled, the kind of cold blue sky pilots trusted. The briefing room smelled faintly of coffee and aviation fuel drifting in from the flight line. Screens displayed the joint training outline, low-altitude navigation, simulated emergency extraction, K9 airborne insertion validation. Squadron Leader Nathan Cross sat near the front, posture straight but quiet. He was not the loudest pilot in the room. He did not need to be. His reputation had been built in long nights over hostile terrain, guiding rescue teams home. Today's mission was routine on paper. It involved integration testing between aircrew and tactical K9 deployment teams. At his boots lay Viper. The German Shepherd rested on a short tactical lead, calm, amber eyes tracking movement without turning his head. Viper was certified for airborne insertion, tracking, and perimeter control. He had recently been cleared after a minor ligament strain sustained during a rural search exercise. The veterinary note had marked him fit for duty, but Nathan had read every line twice. When the briefing concluded, several officers lingered to look at the dog. "You sure he's ready for full insertion profile?" one asked casually. Nathan did not bristle. He wouldn't be here if he wasn't. On the flight line, wind cut sharp across concrete. The jet waited, canopy open, ladder down. Ground crew moved with practiced rhythm. Nathan walked Viper toward the aircraft. "Load," he said evenly. Viper sprang up the ramp with precision, no hesitation. He turned once inside the cockpit area, waiting for direction. Down. The dog folded into his reinforced rear harness position, body aligned, paws steady against the metal floor. His breathing slowed as soon as the straps clicked into place. Nathan climbed in, settled, and began pre-flight checks. At first, nothing stood out. Fuel level stable. Control surfaces responsive. Systems green. Then he felt it. A faint vibration through the rudder pedals, not violent. Not dramatic. Just a subtle, uneven tremor in the left engine during throttle advance. He paused. Left engine reading fluctuates 2% on spool. He called down to the maintenance chief. The chief stepped closer, headset on. "Sensor feedback glitch we've been tracking. Within tolerance, cleared for flight." Nathan looked down at the panel again. The numbers steadied. On paper, nothing justified grounding the aircraft. Still, he logged the sensation mentally. As he scanned the tarmac, he noticed a junior maintenance technician closing a side access panel near the left intake. The tech moved quickly, tools already packed away. When Nathan's gaze lingered, the technician glanced up, then away, too fast. "Panel access completed?" Nathan asked through the open canopy. The maintenance chief answered before the junior could. "Routine check. You're good to go." Nathan nodded, but the faint smell reached him then. Warm insulation. Not burning. Just heated wiring. It faded as quickly as it came. Inside the cockpit, he adjusted mirrors. Viper's ears had pinned back briefly during engine spool. The dog's muscles tightened, then relaxed. Nathan turned slightly. Eyes. Viper lifted his head, focused forward, steady again. No whining. No restlessness. Just attention. The jet taxied. Acceleration built. 500 knots would compress the world into vibration and noise, and inside that sealed metal shell, Viper would rely on nothing but Nathan's voice. That trust settled heavier than rank or medals ever had. They lifted cleanly. Landing gear retracted. The countryside unfolded beneath them. For several minutes, everything held steady. Then the warning lights flickered once. Hydraulic pressure dipped. Returned. Nathan watched the gauges closely. Cross, systems show minor fluctuation, the tower reported. Continue training profile unless condition worsens. He acknowledged, though his eyes stayed fixed on the left engine readings. Another tremor. Slightly stronger. Viper shifted once, bracing instinctively. Stay. The dog froze in place, muscles controlled. Then it happened. A sharp electrical pop cracked through the cockpit, loud and unnatural. Smoke began to curl from the left instrument panel, thin and gray at first. Warning alarms ignited in sequence. Viper stiffened but did not move from position. Cross, you are cleared to eject immediately, tower control ordered, voice sharper now. Nathan's hand hovered over the ejection handle. He turned his head just enough to see Viper strapped behind him, calm despite the smoke. Not without him, Nathan said quietly. The alarms grew louder. Cross, eject immediately. The tower's voice came sharper now, stripped of patience. Smoke thickened inside the cockpit, crawling across the instrument cluster. Warning alarms stacked over one another in high, urgent tones. Nathan's gloved hand hovered inches from the ejection handle. Negative, he answered evenly. Request emergency return vector. I can bring her down. There was a pause on the line, not static. Silence. Then another voice cut in. Senior Operations Officer Wing Commander Peter Hale. Cross, confirm you are declining direct ejection order. Nathan kept his eyes on the failing left engine gauge. Affirm. K9 partner secured in rear harness. Ejection sequence risks secondary failure. There it was. A subtle shift in tone from command. Why is a K9 even airborne in that aircraft model? Hale demanded, frustration bleeding through protocol. This is not standard deployment configuration. It is cleared for joint insertion validation, Nathan replied. Returning to base, hydraulic pressure flickered again, the smoke deepened. Ground Command responded with clipped irritation. You are risking multi-million-pound equipment and potential civilian exposure. Nathan did not rise to it. Copy. Request vector. Outside the base perimeter, the jet had already dropped low enough to be seen and heard. A black trail smeared the sky behind it. Within minutes, base housing residents stepped out into driveways, pointing phones upward. In the nearby village, farmers halted tractors in muddy fields to watch. Social media lit up before the aircraft even began descent. A downed jet, a pilot refusing orders. A military dog inside. Back in the tower, the pressure sharpened. Cross, eject. That is an order. Nathan leaned forward, scanning terrain below. The village sat directly ahead beneath his current glide path. Brick homes. Schoolyard. Narrow roads. Unable, he said, adjusting course. Inside the cockpit, Viper's breathing remained steady despite the growing heat. Stay, Nathan whispered. The dog lowered his head slightly, body still braced within the reinforced harness. He did not claw. He did not whine. He waited. In the operations room, Hale turned from the radio to the gathered officers. He is emotionally compromised, Hale said flatly. Attachment to the dog is clouding judgment. A safety officer beside him nodded. We will need a disciplinary review if he survives this. No one challenged the statement. In the cockpit, a new alarm flared red. The left engine surged violently. Cross, you are losing altitude rapidly, tower control warned. I see it. Nathan's eyes moved to the data recorder panel. The initial surge warning that had triggered the cascade was missing from the log history. The recorder light blinked irregularly, not in its standard capture pattern. Tower, he transmitted calmly. Initial electrical surge did not log. Recorder malfunctioning. Static. Focus on survival, Hale snapped back. Nathan stored the detail mentally. Below him, the village roofs grew larger. Cross, eject now, the tower demanded again. Instead, Nathan banked left sharply. The maneuver cost him precious glide distance. It also shifted the falling jet away from homes and toward open farmland beyond the perimeter fence. On the ground, people gathered along that fence line, security vehicles racing toward likely impact zones. Civilians pulled to the roadside, stepping out to film the black smoke trail descending. The online rumor shifted tone. The pilot is refusing to eject. The pilot is reckless. The pilot has a dog on board. Inside the cockpit, heat intensified. The left engine finally gave way with a deafening explosion that shook the fuselage. The aircraft lurched, nose dipping hard. Altitude dropped fast. "Cross, you have seconds," tower control said. Nathan could see the open fields now. Muddy farmland. No houses. No power lines. The safest ejection window had passed when he banked away from the village. He knew it. He pushed the damaged jet toward the only empty stretch left beneath him. Behind him, Viper did not move. Nathan tightened his grip on the controls and aimed the burning aircraft at the field, choosing impact over abandonment. The ground came up faster than training simulations ever allowed. Nathan cut remaining throttle and adjusted pitch, forcing the crippled jet into a shallow glide. The left engine was gone completely now, dead weight and fire. Control response lagged by fractions of seconds that felt enormous. He aimed for the center of the muddy farmland beyond the perimeter fence. "Brace," he commanded. Behind him, Viper locked down instantly. Muscles tightened. Chin tucked, body rigid within the reinforced harness, exactly as trained for impact insertion drills. The landing gear deployed unevenly. One wheel failed to lock. The aircraft hit hard. Metal screamed as the jet slammed into mud. The compromised landing gear tore away on contact, sending sparks and debris outward. The nose dipped, then dragged. The fuselage skidded across soaked earth in a violent grinding slide that ripped panels free. Fuel ignited behind them. The cockpit jolted again as the aircraft twisted sideways and finally ground to a stop. For half a second, there was silence. Then fire bloomed along the left side of the airframe. Nathan's training took over. He shut down electrical systems and reached for the canopy release. The standard hydraulic trigger failed to respond. Smoke thickened instantly inside the cockpit. He slammed the manual override lever and shoved upward. The canopy cracked open unevenly, heat pouring in. Behind him, Viper remained braced but alert, eyes on Nathan. "Stay," Nathan ordered automatically as he assessed exit path. Outside, security vehicles and fire engines were already bouncing across the field toward the wreck. Sirens wailed. Over loudspeakers, someone shouted for the pilot to clear the aircraft immediately. Nathan turned slightly and scanned the instrument panel one last time. The data recorder module blinked erratically, its capture light stuttering. Instinct moved faster than thought. He reached across the console, tore the compact module free from its slot, and shoved it deep into the inner pocket of his flight vest. It was a small action, quick, nearly invisible. Then he unlatched his own harness and climbed out of the forward cockpit opening, dropping into mud just as a new wave of flames surged from the ruptured engine compartment. Fire crews rushed forward but halted at the expanding heat radius. "Pilot clear." "Step back," someone shouted. Nathan staggered 2 steps away from the wreck, coughing once as smoke clawed at his lungs. Then he heard it, one sharp, controlled bark from inside the cockpit. Not panic. Not frantic. A signal. Nathan froze. Viper was still strapped in. He had cut his own harness but had not fully released the reinforced rear tactical straps in the chaos of impact. The rear compartment was already filling with flame from the ruptured fuel line that now streamed fire along the fuselage seam. "Stay back," the fire chief yelled as he reached Nathan, grabbing his arm. "We have ignition risk. That jet could blow." Nathan pulled against the grip. "My dog is still inside. We will handle it. You are clear." That is an order. Perimeter units expanded outward, pushing base personnel and arriving civilians farther from the crash zone. A lockdown radius formed rapidly. 2 firefighters advanced with suppression foam, but the intensity of the fire forced them back again. Inside the cockpit, flames licked higher. Nathan's chest tightened, not from smoke, from time. He could calculate burn progression faster than most. The fuel line had ruptured fully now. Fire crawled under the rear seat assembly. Another bark. Short, focused. Viper was waiting for direction. Nathan looked once at the advancing fire crew, at the command officer barking containment orders, at the widening ring of people filming from beyond the fence. Then he turned back toward the burning jet. "Stand down!" the fire chief shouted as Nathan broke from his grip. Nathan did not argue. He ran straight toward the cockpit opening as flames roared higher around the rear canopy. Nathan sprinted toward the burning cockpit, boots sinking into wet soil as heat rolled outward in punishing waves. Fire crews were repositioning foam lines, shouting overlapping commands. The air was thick with fuel smoke and electrical burn. He reached the edge of the heat radius before two firefighters intercepted him. "Negative. You are not going back in," one yelled, grabbing his shoulders. "My K9 is still strapped," Nathan shouted back, trying to twist free. The heat blistered against his exposed skin. The rear section of the fuselage was already glowing through warped metal. Inside, flames were beginning to crawl up toward the tactical harness mount. A convoy vehicle tore across the field behind the fire engines. From it stepped the base legal officer, coat flapping in the wind, escorted by security personnel. Moments later, another vehicle arrived. Wing Commander Peter Hale stepped out, face tight, eyes locked on the wreck. He refused a direct ejection order. Hale said loudly to no one in particular, and everyone at once, "This is the result." Nathan heard it even through the roar of flame. He shoved forward again. Firefighters pulled him back harder this time, dragging him several steps away from the burning jet. "You will compromise the entire rescue effort," one barked. At the perimeter fence, the crowd had grown. Base personnel, off-duty airmen, and civilians from the village stood shoulder to shoulder. Phones recorded everything. News vans began arriving at the access road. The narrative was already forming in whispers and posts. The pilot disobeyed orders. He risked the village. He valued a dog over protocol. Hale approached within speaking distance, though he stayed well outside the heat line. "You were instructed to eject," Hale called across the chaos. "You jeopardized personnel and equipment. Stand down immediately." Nathan's jaw tightened. He did not answer Hale. His eyes remained on the cockpit. Inside, a sharp, disciplined bark cut through the noise. Viper. The sound was not frantic. It was not fear. It was alert. Nathan lunged again. Two firefighters wrapped arms around him, hauling him backward with force. At that exact moment, Viper emitted a second bark, shorter, sharper, triggered by the rough physical contact. A trained response to perceived aggression against his handler. "Easy," Nathan shouted instantly. Then louder, commanding through smoke and chaos, "Hold!" Inside the cockpit, the barking stopped immediately. Silence from the dog. Trust. Even surrounded by flame and collapsing structure, Viper obeyed. The base legal officer stepped closer to Hale, speaking low but urgent. Hale nodded once, expression hard. "We will review this conduct formally," Hale said, voice projecting again for witnesses to hear. "There will be accountability." Nathan barely heard him. His focus shifted briefly when he scanned the crash zone and noticed something missing. The maintenance chief who had cleared the aircraft that morning was nowhere in sight. Ground crew who had been first on scene were present. Fire teams were visible. Security personnel were expanding the perimeter. But the chief who had assured him the vibration was nothing had vanished. Nathan marked that absence. A loud metallic crack echoed from the fuselage. The rear internal support beam, weakened by flame and impact stress, gave way. Through the warped canopy frame, Nathan saw it happen. A structural crossmember collapsed inward, sending sparks and fragments cascading across the rear compartment. Fire surged higher. The window to reach Viper without severe burn risk narrowed to seconds. Nathan tore free from the firefighters again, desperation rising past controlled discipline. "You will not re-enter," the fire chief shouted, voice strained now from both command and fear. Behind him, cameras zoomed in. The legal officer spoke rapidly into a phone. Hale watched, arms folded, as if observing the consequences of someone else's failure. Inside the burning cockpit, metal groaned under strain. And Nathan made his decision. The fire was finally beaten back to smoldering ruin. Viper had been pulled free in the final seconds before the rear compartment fully collapsed, carried out by a firefighter while Nathan was physically restrained. The dog had not snapped, had not panicked. Even coughing through smoke, he stayed controlled under command. By nightfall, the crash site was sealed under military police guard. Floodlights cut across twisted metal and scorched earth. Investigators in protective gear moved carefully around the wreckage, documenting every fragment. Nathan stood several yards away under supervision, flight suit singed, hands trembling slightly now that adrenaline had drained. A senior crash investigator crouched near the left engine housing, studying the exposed wiring harness. "That is not typical burn spread," she muttered to her assistant. Nathan heard it. She pointed with a pen. "See the directional carbon scoring. Fire moved outward from here, not inward." Another investigator nodded. "Not consistent with birdstrike ingestion or random electrical fatigue," she added. Nathan's pulse slowed, not from relief but from something colder. Later, inside a temporary operations tent, he handed over the data module he had pulled from the cockpit panel. "I removed this before full ignition," he said evenly. The technician connected it to a secure analysis terminal. The playback began to scroll across the screen. Then it stalled. "Initial surge is missing," the technician said. "There is a gap of several seconds." The investigator leaned in. "Data recorder light was active." "It was blinking irregularly," Nathan answered. The room fell quiet. Another officer entered with maintenance logs printed from that morning. "There was unscheduled panel access recorded 9 minutes before takeoff," he reported. "Logged as routine sensor check." Nathan looked at the timestamp. That was when he had seen the junior technician close the intake panel. Wing Commander Hale entered the tent shortly after, posture rigid. "Squadron Leader Cross," Hale said formally, "pending full inquiry into your refusal to obey direct ejection orders, you are suspended from flight status effective immediately." The words landed heavily in the room. Nathan did not protest. "You endangered base assets and potentially civilians," Hale continued. "Your conduct will be reviewed under formal disciplinary proceedings." To observers, Hale's authority looked firm, controlled, certain. But the crash investigator did not look convinced. She stepped closer to the scorched wiring fragments now laid out on a steel table. "There is more here," she said quietly. Under magnification, a segment of the ejection sequencing circuit showed tool marks. "Fresh. Not factory." The assistant frowned. "This circuit controls canopy release timing and explosive bolt sequence. If tampered," she said slowly, "premature ignition could occur during ejection." Nathan's mind locked onto that statement. "If I had pulled the handle at altitude?" he asked. She met his eyes. "We cannot confirm yet. But if the sequencing interlock was bypassed, you and the rear seat occupant might not have survived the detonation." The air inside the tent felt heavier than the smoke earlier that day. Nathan replayed the moment in the cockpit. The tower ordering him to eject. Hale's voice insisting. He had refused because of Viper, but the refusal may have saved them both. Hale's jaw tightened slightly, but he said nothing. The investigator turned back to the maintenance logs. "Who authorized this last-minute panel access?" she asked. A junior officer scanned the sheet. "Cleared by maintenance chief. Signature present." Nathan's eyes narrowed. He had not seen that chief at the crash perimeter. Not once. The investigator closed the folder slowly. "This is no longer a simple equipment failure." Hale shifted his stance. "Speculation is premature." "Possibly," she replied evenly, "but deliberate interference cannot be ruled out." Silence settled again. Nathan stood very still, processing. He had been accused of recklessness, of emotional compromise, of choosing a dog over duty. Yet if the circuit had been tampered with, ejecting would have triggered a mid-air explosion, which meant someone had altered his aircraft knowing he and Viper would be inside. The investigator stepped closer to him, lowering her voice. "Squadron Leader," she said quietly, "has anyone recently expressed interest in seeing you removed from flight status?" Nathan met her gaze. "Who," she asked carefully, "might benefit from you being grounded permanently?" By the next morning, the crash had moved from fire to narrative. Clips of the burning jet flooded social media. Commentators who had never stepped inside a cockpit debated Nathan's judgment in harsh, confident tones. He disobeyed a lawful order. He risked homes. He let emotion override discipline. On base, whispers carried farther than official statements. Some personnel avoided eye contact when he passed through corridors under temporary administrative restriction. Viper lay on a stainless examination table inside the base veterinary clinic, oxygen mask fitted loosely over his muzzle. The German Shepherd's breathing was steady but shallow from smoke exposure. Dr. Elise Morton checked lung sounds carefully. "Minor inhalation irritation," she said. "No airway burns." "He is strong." Nathan rested a hand gently against Viper's neck. "Easy," he murmured. The dog's tail thumped once against the table. Calm. Controlled. Outside the clinic, 2 security airmen discussed the crash in low voices. "Village Council is already filing concern letters," one said. "Command wants this quiet," the other replied. Nathan heard enough. He felt the pressure building, not from flames this time, but from reputation. Later that afternoon, while Viper rested in a recovery kennel, Nathan stopped by the canine equipment locker room to retrieve the reinforced airborne harness used during the flight. Investigators would want it for documentation. The hallway was quiet. Too quiet. He noticed the locker door slightly ajar. Inside, the overhead fire alarm panel flickered once before a sharp beeping tone erupted. Smoke sensor triggered. Nathan stepped forward instinctively. The faint smell hit him again, burning insulation. Inside Viper's equipment locker, a small electrical device smoldered against the metal wall, wires exposed, clearly placed. Not accidental. A deliberate ignition attempt. Security alarms escalated. "Stand clear," a responding airman shouted from the corridor. Nathan backed away just as Viper, who had been walking at heel beside him on a short lead for a light recovery stretch, lifted his head sharply. The dog inhaled deeply once. "Focused. Track," Nathan commanded quietly. No panic. No bark. Viper's posture changed immediately. Nose lowered to the locker threshold. He circled once, then moved down the hallway at controlled pace, pulling just enough tension into the lead to signal direction. Security personnel followed. Through the corridor. Down the stairwell. Across the maintenance wing. Viper did not hesitate. He stopped briefly near a storage cabinet, inhaled again, then continued toward a restricted hangar bay adjacent to aircraft maintenance. Nathan's heartbeat slowed into controlled rhythm. This was no random vandalism. Inside the hangar, Viper guided straight toward a row of tool storage crates near a private maintenance locker. He stopped at one particular crate and sat. Alert position. Nathan crouched and opened it under security supervision. Inside lay a toolkit. Wiring cutters. Micro-soldering iron. Insulation fragments. Among the debris were small pieces of burned wire matching the unique gauge of the ejection sequencing circuit recovered from the crash site. Second confirmation. The sabotage did not end in the air. Someone had attempted to destroy evidence by igniting Viper's harness equipment locker. "Who has access to this locker?" security demanded. A list was pulled quickly. The same junior technician who had closed the intake panel before takeoff. At that exact moment, Base Entry Control notified command that the technician's vehicle had attempted to exit through a side service gate without proper clearance. Security vehicles intercepted the car less than half a mile from the perimeter. The technician was detained. Nathan stood inside the hangar beside Viper, who remained seated, steady, breathing evenly after the track. He looked down at the burned wiring fragments in the crate. The sabotage was not an accident. Not a malfunction. It was layered. Planned in the air, covered on the ground. And it had nearly cost both him and Viper their lives. Pressure no longer felt abstract. It felt targeted. As security escorted the detained technician back onto base grounds, Nathan understood something deeper. This was not about equipment failure. This was about removal. And someone had wanted him gone badly enough to risk killing a pilot and his dog. The junior technician did not hold out long. Under formal questioning inside a secured briefing room, With legal counsel present and security recording every word, his composure cracked. "I did not act alone," he said finally, voice shaking. "I was told to modify the circuit." "Told by who?" the investigator pressed. The technician swallowed. "By someone above my clearance level." The room shifted. Outside that door, pressure mounted fast. Within hours, Wing Commander Peter Hale addressed a closed leadership session, citing the importance of maintaining morale and preventing unfounded conspiracy theories from spreading across the base. "This incident must remain contained," Hale stated firmly. "We cannot allow speculative narratives to damage operational readiness." Nathan was not invited to that meeting. Instead, he was handed an official notice that afternoon. Pending investigation, he was grounded indefinitely. Further, his authorization to operate within the Airborne Canine Integration Program was suspended. A clause suggested potential permanent removal based on psychological evaluation. Emotional instability. That phrase appeared in writing. The accusation hit harder than the suspension. Nathan stood outside the administrative building, reading the notice twice. Viper sat at heel beside him, silent but attentive. Across the lawn, reporters gathered beyond the gate, already sensing escalation. Microphones extended over the fence as security attempted to maintain order. One journalist shouted, "Squadron Leader Cross, did you disobey orders because you are overly attached to your dog?" Another called out, "Is this about personal pride?" Nathan remained still. A reporter pushed too close to the security barrier, voice raised aggressively. Viper's posture shifted. "Guard," Nathan said calmly. The German shepherd moved one step forward and positioned himself squarely between Nathan and the shouting reporter. No teeth bared. No growl, just presence. Steady eyes, controlled stance. The crowd quieted slightly. Nathan met the cameras without raising his voice. "I followed my training and protected civilian lives," he said evenly. "The investigation will speak for itself." Behind him, Hale exited the building surrounded by aides. His expression remained composed, but his eyes did not meet Nathan's. Inside the investigation tent, forensic analysts completed deeper extraction from the recovered data module Nathan had saved. He made a decision. Until now, portions of the flight data had been restricted under standard operational classification. Nathan authorized full forensic release of the module to independent military oversight, waiving certain procedural protections. If someone altered that aircraft, he told the lead investigator, every second of that recording matters. The analyst nodded and began processing expanded recovery protocols. Hours passed. Night settled again over RAF Lakenheath. Inside the secured analysis lab, a breakthrough emerged. "Sir," the analyst called out. Nathan stepped forward. On the screen, enhanced reconstruction of the corrupted data stream filled in missing milliseconds through buffer recovery. There it was. Time stamped precisely 9 minutes before takeoff. A manual bypass command injected into the ejection sequencing system. Safety interlock overridden. The canopy explosive bolts would have triggered out of phase if ejection was initiated under load, mid-air. The lab went silent. It was not a mechanical failure. It was not wear and tear. It was deliberate. Outside the lab window, sirens wailed again, not for fire this time, but for vehicles converging on administrative offices. Nathan exhaled slowly. The line had been crossed long before the crash. Now it was visible. And someone high enough to order silence was about to face what that visibility meant. By sunrise the next day, the tone on base had changed. 2 black vehicles bearing Ministry of Defense insignia rolled through the main gate under escort. RAF Special Investigation Branch officers stepped out alongside Ministry forensic specialists. Their presence alone shifted the atmosphere from internal inquiry to formal investigation. Wing Commander Hale stood rigid outside the operations building as they approached. Inside the secured briefing room, the lead investigator laid out the evidence without theatrics. "Forensic reconstruction confirms deliberate bypass of the ejection sequencing safety interlock," she began. "Tool mark analysis matches wiring fragments recovered from Hangar 3. Photographs of the toolkit Viper had located were projected onto the screen. Micro scratches on the wire cutters aligned precisely with deformation patterns on the tampered circuit. The junior technician, pale and visibly exhausted, sat between two officers. "I was instructed to modify the interlock," he said again under recorded statement. "I was told it was a systems test authorization." "By whom?" The investigator pressed calmly. He hesitated only a moment this time. "Wing Commander Hale." Silence fell hard across the room. Maintenance logs were brought forward. Unscheduled panel access 9 minutes before takeoff. Authorization signature verified. Security footage from the hangar corridor showed Hale entering the maintenance area shortly before the technician's modification window. The case no longer rested on suspicion. It rested on documented sequence. Hale's composure held for several seconds as the evidence was presented. Then it fractured. "This is procedural overreach," he said sharply. "I authorized routine diagnostics." "You authorized tampering with an active ejection system," the investigator corrected. "Under load, that modification would have resulted in canopy detonation during mid-air ejection, which meant one thing. If Nathan had obeyed the order to eject, both he and Viper would likely have been killed in an explosive misfire at altitude." The investigator turned toward Nathan. "Your refusal to eject prevented a mid-air detonation," she stated clearly. There it was. Authority spoken plainly. Hale's jaw tightened. He stood abruptly. "This is absurd," he snapped. "I will not stand here." He moved toward the hangar exit, posture shifting from controlled officer to cornered man. "Stop," a military police officer commanded. Hale did not. He pushed through the hangar threshold into open concrete space, attempting to clear distance toward the parked staff vehicles. Nathan stepped aside instinctively, leash still in hand. "Hold," he said calmly. Viper launched forward in controlled motion, not wild, not biting, not frantic. He closed the gap in seconds. Instead of striking, the German Shepherd pivoted sharply and drove his shoulder into Hale's lower leg while angling his body weight upward. The move was precise and trained, designed to destabilize without tearing flesh. Hale lost balance and went down hard onto the concrete. Viper immediately positioned over him, forepaws planted on Hale's forearms, weight centered, teeth visible but not engaged. No bite, no growl. Just containment. Military police reached them within seconds and applied restraints. "Stand down," Nathan ordered. Viper stepped back instantly, returning to heel position as Hale was lifted to his feet in cuffs. The hangar fell silent, except for the distant whir of ventilation fans. Hale was escorted to a waiting vehicle under formal arrest for conspiracy, endangerment of personnel, and tampering with military equipment. The junior technician followed under separate detention. There was no cheering inside the hangar. Only controlled movement and procedure. Statements were taken from all witnesses. The fire chief provided testimony about Nathan's attempted re-entry to rescue his canine partner. Crash investigators confirmed that Nathan had deliberately steered the failing jet away from village housing despite losing the safest ejection window. Outside, news crews waited for official comment. A senior ministry representative addressed them directly. Preliminary findings indicate deliberate sabotage of the aircraft's ejection sequencing system. The pilot's decision to maintain control and avoid ejection likely prevented greater loss of life. The narrative shifted in real time. The fire chief stepped forward unexpectedly. "I watched that pilot steer a burning jet away from homes," he said publicly. "And I watched him try to go back into that wreck for his partner. That was not recklessness. That was responsibility." Applause broke out, not loud or chaotic, but steady, from personnel gathered behind the barrier line. Nathan did not react outwardly. He stood with Viper at heel, posture straight, face composed. The weight of the past 2 days settled into something quieter. Not triumph, clarity. As the sun began to drop behind the scorched farmland where the jet had gone down, Nathan walked back toward the crash site perimeter one last time. The field was still blackened in places, investigators packing away final markers. Viper sat beside him at the fence line, ears forward, breathing steady. The sky above them was clear again. No smoke, no fire. Just fading light over ground they had survived. Nathan rested his hand lightly on Viper's head. The decision that nearly destroyed his career had saved both their lives, and now, finally, the truth stood where flames once had. 3 days after the arrest, the base felt steadier. Viper stood calmly inside the veterinary clinic while Dr. Tony Mile. Elise Morton listened to his lungs one final time. No crackle. No strain. Oxygen saturation normal. The mild smoke irritation had cleared faster than expected. "He is fully fit," she said with a small nod. No restrictions. Nathan exhaled quietly. He had faced fire without shaking, but this clearance mattered more than any board review. Outside, administrative proceedings moved with measured pace. Wing Commander Hale was formally suspended pending court-martial. The junior technician remained detained under military custody. An interim commander had been assigned to oversee operations until permanent leadership was appointed. Nathan's own suspension was lifted with written acknowledgement that his actions had prevented civilian casualties and avoided catastrophic mid-air detonation. A commendation review had been opened. He did not ask for it. What he noticed instead were the letters. Handwritten envelopes began arriving at squadron headquarters. Village residents described watching the burning aircraft bank away from their homes. Parents wrote about children playing in gardens beneath that flight path. Farmers described the field that absorbed the impact. One letter, written in uneven handwriting by a child, simply said, "Thank you for not landing on our house." Nathan read each one in silence. On a quiet morning later that week, he walked Viper to the outer training field just after sunrise. The grass was damp with dew. The air carried no smoke, only cool clarity. The scorched farmland beyond the perimeter fence had already been leveled and reseeded, though darker soil still marked the crash line. Nathan knelt and unbuckled Viper's collar. The leather was singed at the edges from the fire. He set it aside carefully and lifted the restored airborne service harness from a nearby bench. Clean. Repaired. Reinforced again. He guided it over Viper's shoulders and secured the straps. "Easy," he said softly. Viper stepped forward, then paused, pressing his head briefly against Nathan's knee, not seeking comfort. Acknowledging it, for a long moment they stayed that way. Around them, training resumed in distant sections of the base. Engines roared. Cadets marched. Routine rebuilt itself in quiet layers. The investigation would continue through formal channels. Court-martial procedures would take months. Evidence chains would be documented thoroughly. Statements archived. But the essential truth had already surfaced. Nathan rose and gave a simple command. "Heel." Viper aligned instantly at his side. They walked toward the runway edge together, not as symbols, not as controversy, but as a pilot and his partner returning to duty. No crowd, no cameras. Just morning light, stretching long shadows across open ground. The fire had burned through metal and reputation alike. What remained was steadier. Trust had held. And trust, Nathan understood now more clearly than ever, was not about rank or command authority. It was about responsibility. He looked down once more at the dog beside him. Loyalty is proven not when escape is easy, but when staying costs everything.